All members of the committee should have their video on, but will remain muted until invited to speak. If you wish to attract the chairman's attention, please make use of the instant messaging function. All the members of the press and public will remain muted unless they have registered to speak, and the chairman will let them know when they can make their representations. The format of the meeting will be as per the agenda published. Over to you, Chairman.
So what I need to do now is ask each councillor and officer present who's taken part in the meeting to introduce themselves and to confirm that they can see and hear everything. That's before we start the official business. I'm going to name the committee member and then they just need to confirm that they can see and hear. So, Councillor Barber.
She's not present, Chairman.
Would assume can't. Councillor Hilary Bruce. Hilary Bruce, I can see Hilary Bruce.
Yeah, Councillor Hilary Bruce. Barber. I can not hear you very well, Chairman. Just about. But I'm present. I'm Councillor for Bridgewater Fairfax.
Okay, Councillor Ian Dyer. I can see, maybe you hear me. Any advice, Mr. Taylor?
Councillor Dyer, can you hear us? Perhaps we come back to Councillor Dyer at the end, Chairman.
Okay, Councillor Filmer.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I can hear you, and I'm the Councillor Filmer for the Knoll Ward.
I can see Councillor Filmer.
Yep. Just to confirm, Chairman, I am present. I can hear you.
Finneran.
Good morning, Chairman. Good afternoon, rather. Yes, I can sort of hear you, and I'm the ward councillor for Cheddar and Shipham.
Okay, that's Councillor Finneran by the sound of it. Is there a delay by any chance?
I think there probably is a slight delay at your end, Chairman.
It's not Councillor Grimes. Okay. Councillor Grimes.
Councillor Grimes.
Thank you, Chairman. I can see and hear you, Councillor Tony Grimes from Barrow, but you keep breaking up, I have to say. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Hendry.
Sedgemoor District Councillor Alistair Hendry for Burnham-on-Sea Central, and I'm having a job here, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Chairman, if you can hear me, it may be worth turning your video off to see if that helps improve the sound quality.
Councillor. Off. Okay, let's try that.
That sounds better, Chairman.
Not sure it's letting me. Did it? Oh, well. I didn't do it, to be honest. Okay, Councillor Levy.
Councillor Liz Levy for Bridgewater Hamp. I can hear you most of the time.
Brilliant. Councillor Lilly, I believe, has given apologies.
That's right, Chairman.
Councillor Revens.
Good afternoon, Councillor Smedley. Councillor Bill Revens from North Petherton Ward. I can hear all the other members loud and clear. Unfortunately, Councillor Smedley, it sounds like you're from the planet of Skaro, which is the home of the Daleks.
Well, Leeds is very similar to that, but never mind. I'll just councillors that are attending and presenting the case are not members of the committee. That's Councillor Phil Harvey.
Present and correct. Councillor Phil Harvey, Burnham Central.
Okay, and Councillor Mike Murphy.
Yes, Chair, good afternoon. Councillor Mike Murphy here, Burnham North. I can hear you and see you.
Brilliant. Is attending the meeting. Can I confirm that Mr. McGinty is present?
Yes, Chairman, I'm present.
And they have several officers. My name, Dorothy Farrell.
I couldn't hear that.
Dorothy O'Farrell.
That was I was asking Dorothy O'Farrell.
Good afternoon.
I can see her in the picture section.
Good.
Can you hear Dorothy? Yeah.
I can barely hear you, Councillor Smedley. I can't make out sentences.
Okay. Carry on through this for the time being. Rose Stokes, Scrutiny Officer.
Good afternoon. I'm Rose Stokes, Scrutiny Officer to the committee, and I can see and hear, but struggling to hear you a little bit. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Doug Ramsey, Strategic Director. I can see and hear you. Thank you.
Tim Mander.
Yeah, yes, Tim Mander here, Property and Commercialism Service Manager. Can see and just about hear you from time to time.
Hi, I'm Nick Tate. I'm the Service Manager for Planning Policy, and I can see and sometimes hear you, Chairman.
And Steve Taylor.
Yes, good afternoon, Chairman. I'm Steve Taylor, Committee Manager.
Okay. So now I need to outline how the meeting will work. I hope you hear me and not just several words from that, but I'm going to have a go anyway. We have a number of other councillors, officers, press and members of the public listening to the meeting, and the planned structure will be like this. The 6 call-in points will be outlined by the councillors calling them in. That's in this case Councillor Harvey and Councillor Murphy will be speaking, and then we have 4 public speakers, Mr Matthews, De Russell, Stevens and Keane, and then we have a councillor speaking, that's Janet Keane, Councillor Janet Keane. Then we'll have Joy Russell, who is who's considered as a key witness to the committee, and she'll be given some time to speak after that. Then we'll have Tim Mandron and Nick Tate will address the points of questions raised. Then there'll be a series of questions amongst those people, and at that point it will go to committee for the discussion and any recommendation. So I assume we're clear to carry on with the committee, even though people may not be terribly hearing of me, although I've heard everybody else totally fine. Do we have any apologies?
Yes, Chairman. Apologies from Councillor Rachel Lilly and Councillor Sue Barber.
Okay. As regards urgent business, there is none. As regards public speaking, that will take part within the body of the main meeting when it starts. Item 4 is, do we have any declarations of interest? Councillor Filmer.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I would like to declare an interest. As you know, I'm a member of the Development Management Committee, which considered an application on this site. I understand the legal advice we've had saying that technically in legal terms the two items are separate. I think, to be honest, in terms of public perception, they will be seen very much as being linked. And in order to maintain clarity, I will declare an interest and leave the decision making today up to the rest of the committee and withdraw from the meeting.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Filmer. Can I take Councillor Hendry?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Again, agenda item 5. All right. I have a personal interest. I too am on the Planning Committee, Development Committee. The public perception, again, for me, could interpret my comments and actions as predetermination. Therefore, I have to withdraw from this committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hendry. Councillor Grimes.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I too am a member of the Development Control Committee and took part in this application, and I think it is inappropriate for me to take part in this discussion today, and as such I will withdraw from the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grimes. Councillor Janet Keane.
Thank you, Chairman. I am the ward member for Highbridge and Burnham Marine, and the subject of today's discussion falls within my ward, but also because of at the executive, it is fair to say that I have a predetermination. So therefore, when I speak today, I am purely a member of the public and a resident of Highbridge. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Keane. And Councillor Revens.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just for clarity, I am also a member of the Development Committee. I have read the legal advice with interest and listened to the Council Solicitor, and I'm confident and happy that I can maintain an open mind and look at the evidence of this decision, and I will not be leaving. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Revens. I think we can now start the main part of the meeting. I noted an indication from Councillor Murphy. Do you wish to add something at this stage, Councillor Murphy?
I do, just to let everyone know that I am the Town Councillor for Highbridge, and I am also a member of the Planning Committee, but at this stage I believe I do not have any problem with it at all legally, and I am happy to go forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Let's now go into the meeting proper, and the simple item on this agenda is the call-in of the Executive's Decision number 6 of the 24th of June 2020, which is disposal of land at Lakeside Isleport, and the agenda item is to consider a call-in request of that Executive Decision concerning the disposal of land adjoining Lakeside Isleport, Highbridge, to Colne Residential Limited, and to facilitate residential development on 5.577 acres of land acquired for open space purposes. All the necessary reports have been circulated and the appropriate call-in papers signed. Two of the councillors who signed the call-in papers are here to present that case. There are 6 items they want considered. I'd like to hand over now to those 2 councillors, that's Councillors Harvey and Councillor Murphy, in whichever way they see fit to present this case. Can you tell me which one of you is speaking first, and then carry on?
Thank you, Chairman. It'd be myself, Councillor Harvey, and I'm going to present the case on the first 3 points, and then Councillor Murphy will take over and deal with the final 3. The first point that we've raised is the decision to sell this land acquired for public open space. Sorry. The first point is the decision to sell this land acquired for public open space and the failure to bring forward any such use over 20 years. Now, as the agenda items, background papers will tell you, the land was acquired in 1996 for public open space, but the allocation wasn't carried forward into the next local plan. However, the district proposals map of 2004 did show most of the area committed for public open space, and the policy of protection RLT1 to retain recreational open space was applied. In 2012, a Section 106 order was agreed with the developers of the Springfield Road housing, specifically towards, and I quote, the costs of improving and enhancing the council's public open space at Isleport Ponds. So though the land was no longer designated as such, reports to committee still referred to it as public open space. In June 2018, one of our press releases stated, although the field is not formal open space, it is still currently protected from development through planning policy. And this is one of the reasons why it was only mentioned in passing in the neighbourhood plan and was not included as a designated local green space. Confusion continues to this day. As recently as last month, a paper presented to the Planning Policy Group referred to the Council's public open space at Lakeside. Now, if our officers report it as such, is it any wonder that local residents firmly believe it to be public open space? The distinction between public open space and publicly owned open space is not one which is obvious to the layperson. The people of Highbridge have accepted significant housing developments in recent years, with reservations about infrastructure provision, but now see this land, which was acquired to serve their needs, being sold. Is the only plan for Highbridge to build more houses? By December 2016, the executive agreed in principle to sell the land, and in 2019 the land was designated as white land. It was said that the Section 106 proposal had proved impossible to bring forward. Now this raises two questions. What efforts were made in the 16 years from 1996 to 2012 to bring into use the land acquired for public open space? And in 2012, why was the Section 106 agreement entered into, which committed £400,000 to a project which only 4 years later was effectively abandoned? The second point is the decision to sell green space in the Highbridge area, which is deficient in this locality. Now, Appendix E addresses this point in detail. It claims there is no deficiency of accessible natural green space in the area, and that even if there were, the new development would provide a level 2 area. It says, the existing Woolrow ponds are identified as a local wildlife site, level 1, providing ANGST provision for the surrounding area, including the land adjacent to Lakeside. It should also be noticed that provision of formal and informal open space is included within Natural England's Green Spaces category at level 2. And therefore, the additional public open space secured through the planning consent for the land adjoining Lakeside would be added to the ANGST provision in this area. Now, Nature Nearby gives a definition of accessible green space as being for general public use, free of charge, and compliant with the requirements under the Disability Discrimination Act, and it defines natural green space as one in which human control and activities are not intense. Now, the reliance on the Woolrow ponds as fulfilling the ANGST provision is factually incorrect. The ponds are owned by the Bridgewater and Highbridge Angling Association and are only accessible to fee-paying members. Therefore, they do not comply with the accessibility criterion of being for general public use and free of charge, and should not be classified as a level 1 area. Approving the sale of the Lakeside land, which potentially does fit the criterion, would result in the loss of a level 1 facility and its replacement with a much smaller, 1/30th of the size, level 2 area. However you look at it, this is a loss of natural open space to the people of Highbridge. The third point is the threat to the biodiversity of this site during a climate change crisis. Now, the committee will hear the evidence on this from Mrs. Russell, and you've had the opportunity before the meeting to view the video she has produced. She's made the arguments far more eloquently than we can, and her contributions establish that there is a wide variety of flora and fauna on the land. For many years, this has been enjoyed by local residents. Indeed, Mrs. Russell has told me that she was taken on nature walks there when in the Brownies. Appendix D deals with the biodiversity point and notes that Natural England raises no objections. However, Natural England does make the point that there have been a number of recent medium-sized housing developments in the area, and they are concerned about a gradual cumulative increase in recreational pressures on designated sites as a result. They also say that their lack of objection does not imply that there are no effects on the natural environment. Now, a third party holds a possessory title to the land between the railway line and the lake, which has 100-year-old hedgerows. Are these threatened by the proposed development? It's acknowledged that the developer will be putting in place mitigation measures to deal with environmental effects, but we maintain that these will never be able to provide the full range of habitats that are currently present, and so biodiversity will suffer. Does anyone seriously think that future generations of Brownies will be visiting a housing development to view and learn about the wildlife that it contains? I'll now pass you over to Councillor Murphy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Can everyone hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, Councillor.
I will begin item 4, item 5, and then item 6. Item 4, the allocation of the Section 106 monies towards this site being transferred to the developer. The rationale behind this is that this will fulfill the original agreement by providing a public open space in the new development which will serve the residents of the Springfield Road area. In addition, it is argued that it should be done as the 106 agreement runs out in 2022. This again raises the question, why, 8 years after it was agreed, has the 106 agreement not been implemented? It is claimed that access is too difficult, but there are existing footpaths into the site. Why are these so insufficient that the use of this field cannot be implemented? If the developers are able to gain foot access off the Bristol Bridge alongside the lakes into the field, instead of using the railway level crossing, why could the council not have done the same? Our position is that the Section 106 agreement from 2012 is drawn broadly enough that money can be spent on laying out the land and improving the footpaths into the site, both from Springfield Road and the Isleport Business Park, thereby providing a natural green space for both residents and employees to enjoy. We do not accept that one of the arguments in favour of the development is that it can utilise this 400,000 from a previous developer. This council should be utilising it itself. Number 5. The desirability of keeping open space for the health and well-being of local residents. The benefits of open space for the health and well-being of people are well documented. For example, in Natural England's Nature Nearby document by the World Health Organization, and in our own health and well-being strategy. To quote from this, health outcomes and inequality in health due to lower incomes are less pronounced where people have access to green space. Green areas provide shared space which enhances a sense of belonging and reduces social isolation. Other positive benefits of access to green space include reduced levels of overweight and obesity, improved mental health, and increased longevity. People also report better self-rated health. Highbridge contains a significant proportion of low-income families. The current crisis has shown increased levels of mental health problems in the community, but also that more people have discovered this green lung and have benefited from it. Losing this open space will remove this source of benefit. We cannot have too many large, green, natural spaces for our developing population, locally and nationally. The establishment of a health lung for use by all present and future residents is an essential part of our global warming and climate change commitments. Situated in the midst of Highbridge, it can become a significant factor in attracting families to settle in the town because of this major natural leisure area. A direct result of the COVID-19 lockdown has resulted in families in crowded towns and cities seeking to move to the southwest. We can no longer simply build houses. We need a full local master plan which includes this natural park. COVID-19 has caused many people and institutions to reevaluate their priorities, values and lifestyles. An increasing awareness and appreciation of the natural environment and our effects on it is a common feature. This council needs to be part of this process and support its residents in their aspirations for the future. And the last the last question, question 6, item 6, was sufficient weight given to the public consultation in making this decision. The public consultation carried out before the executive meeting showed overwhelming opposition to the proposed sale of land. 30 written objections were received, some in great detail, together with a 700 signature local petition and a 500-person online petition, of which 319 signatories came from local addresses. The points raised are summarised in the report to the executive and cover some which we have highlighted as well as others. I am sure that members have read the report and had the opportunity to ponder on the points raised. The officer's response to the consultation does, we believe, miss the point. It maintains essentially that the objections are planning matters, and as planning permission was granted, they were addressed at that stage and do not need to be considered afresh, so they say. However, planning is a quasi-legal process, as we know. It merely deals with what is an acceptable use of land. As we all know, anyone can apply for planning permission on any site, but that does not mean that the owner needs to implement any permission granted. So to respond that because planning permission has been granted, the consultation responses have been dealt with, is to argue that because something can be done, it should be done. The real question is the proposed sale of land in the best interests of the people of Sedgemoor, and in particular of Highbridge? The executive decided that the need for new housing outweighed the need to retain this land, although there are 25 other urban opportunity sites in the local plan which can fulfill the housing need. The responses to the consultation show that the local people disagree with the proposed use of this site. They believe that development in Highbridge has not been matched by parallel provision of facilities, and that it is time this was rectified. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to create a natural public space linked to the Warrow Lakes, which, although only accessible through permit, form a continuous habitat within this area. Sedgemoor District Council has declared itself a business, but it risks being accused of taking an asymmetric, blinkered business view and choosing to ignore this serious opportunity for long-term health and leisure in a natural area. By placing the emphasis to the responses on planning matters, the wider opinions and needs of the local community have not been properly addressed, and we believe this matter should be reconsidered. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for listening.
I think the chairman may have been trying to unmute and actually took himself out of the meeting, so he should be joining the meeting again.
Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, Councillor, we can hear you.
Right, I'll try not to touch this machine. So thank you to those councillors who spoke then. I'd like to now go to the public speakers. I believe that Mr. John Matthews is not present. So the first speaker that we have is Jason Russell. Is Jason Russell lined up to speak?
His phone should now be unmuted, Chairman.
Mr. Russell, are you able to hear us?
It's Jason Edwards.
Jason Edwards. I've got Jason Russell down here, but
Apologies
Jason Edwards.
if we got the wrong name.
Okay. Jason, would you like to try to say what you have to say in 3 minutes, if you can, please? Up to you.
I'll do my best. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jason Edwards. I'm a firefighter in Avon Fire and Rescue. I've been in the fire service now in our area for 20 odd years. I'm also a Highbridge resident, and I would just like to object to the sale of this land. I believe there wasn't enough information given to us, the public, or there wasn't enough time allocated for any public consultation. Before we even knew what was happening in this area, the developers, I think it's Colne they called, were put forward their plans for building on this site. So from that point, we then went about to everyone around our local area, and we had, as was mentioned before, we've had over 1,500 local people signing petitions. So I think you can really see the sort of the amount of people that are behind this that don't want this to happen. So, I mean, we as residents, as Highbridge residents, we've taken it upon ourselves to keep this public open space as a usable, something we can use. So we've actually created a path around this field so that everyone can enjoy it. As it seems to be that the council have just abandoned it, so we took it upon ourselves to try and keep it being usable. So we'd just like to know, as residents, why the council didn't use this 106 money from the ASDA development, what it was intended for. As far as we were aware, it was for the development of public open space in our area. Instead, don't quote me on this, I'm not an expert, but I understand that we are now giving this money to the developers. I've been told, whether this is correct or not, that the field in Lakeside is being sold for £350,000. Now that to me is massively undervalued. Are we really getting best value for this site? I mean, as far as I'm aware, if my maths is correct, if we're giving Colne Residential £400,000, they're getting a free site and 50 grand in their pocket. What developer wouldn't want that? I mean, this is a total misappropriation of funds by Sedgemoor Council, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as every local person I've spoken to. We just can't understand the thought and thinking behind this. We just need to, the only thing we can think of is that this is all happening now because the S106 money, if it's not used by a certain date, then has to be given back to the original developer. So this is the only solution we can think is why you're making these decisions now, because otherwise we're going to lose this money. I'm also confused as to why in previous publications, which the guys have already mentioned, is the land states that it is public open space. And when we went to the meetings and consultation meetings, we were told by the councillors, oh no, it's not public open space anymore, it's now land that can be sold for development. Now, when was this changed? We weren't informed of this change from public open space to development land. No one was even aware of it. I also have a friend who has a scaffolding business, and he's a subcontractor for Colne Residential, and he's told me that even back in March, Colne Development have been in touch with him and said, this is a done deal, we're going ahead at the end of the year. Now to us, we just can't understand this thinking. You haven't even made any decisions on the sale of the land, yet the developer is telling subcontractors, get your boys ready, you need to get out and start work because this is a done deal. So you can understand our feelings as residents of this. We don't really know what is going on. I'd just like to say, these decisions you're going to make now, this is not for our generation. You're making these decisions for our future generation, for our children. Okay, you as a council have signed up for a climate change. Let's do the right thing for this area. We need this public open space. You can see COVID-19 has brought this to the forefront. of everybody. We need these green open spaces. Everyone wants to move out of cities. Is it any wonder why they want to come to our areas? Because they're beautiful. We have these lovely open spaces. Let's keep hold of these spaces. Please do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Edwards, for that. The next speaker I have on the list is Geraldine Stevens. I hope that name's correct. Is Geraldine Stevens on the line?
Can you hear me?
I can.
You can. I'm Geraldine Stevens, alias Charlie Tillum. I have petitioned from day one regarding this site, regarding to the fact that the council had locked the gates many years ago to stop people going in there. At no time had they come to cut the grass, cut the path, do anything, so the idea was to stop us using it. We have done our best. The wildlife over there is unbelievable. We know that because it comes through to the lake. As far as I'm concerned, it's all underhanded. It's all been hush-hush. We have done what we can. We feel totally let down by the council. This green space we desperately need. My grandchildren have been over there on many, many occasions, and so has many other children. Even the other day, one of the children went over there and collected stuff and made a pretend nest for a bird. Now, if you steal this from us, the local people that believe we should keep this and use it to the advantage, that would have been great, but we weren't given the option. And why at no stage were we told we could buy this land? We could have done a GoFundMe page many years ago and maybe raise the money for it, but we have never been given that option. It's all been done behind our backs, and this is why we are so angry as the Highbridge people that we have been let down by our own councillors, our own people that have, not saying all of them, but seem to think that the development comes first, not the people. And as far as I'm concerned, I feel totally let down. There is a piece of land that is beautiful. The wildlife is unbelievable. You're talking about making a better access. What better access? We've always managed fine for 20 odd years. The council have a lot to answer to. Why did you lock these gates? Why did you stop us using it? Why did you stop cutting the grass? To me, it doesn't fit. And the same thing as what somebody just said a moment ago, the done deal. We have been told, even by the people that own the other side of the land, it was a done deal 18 months ago. We were told to stop fighting because we were wasting our time. That's my opinion, and that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
And thank you very much for expressing that. Now we're going to move on to Mr. Roger Keane. Is Roger Keane on the line?
Roger?
Yeah. Afternoon, Chairman, members.
Okay, over to you, Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. I note the 6 points raised in the calling request that can be discussed here today. I would like to comment on numbers 2, 4 and 6, and I will leave number 4 until last as this is my prime concern. Point 2. The idea of relocating wildlife is somewhat as a misnomer, as the only area available has already been allocated as housing. I refer to the land between Isleport and the motorway and the so-called green space provision within the application insults the intelligence. Point 6. I do not believe that the executive gave any weight to the number of objections and the general feeling or the wishes of the people of Highbridge. In Highbridge, we are already being inundated with new housing. According to the Somerset County Council School Organisation Area Plan, detailed planning applications for 1,232 new homes have been submitted. These include Brew Farm Phases 1 and 2, Isleport, Wall Road and Newtown Road. So to say the lakeside market homes are desperately needed stretches credulity, not to mention the lack of required infrastructure. And point 4. This point gives me the great concerns and unease. Numerous attempts have been made over the last few years to try and use this Section 106 money for various projects within Highbridge for the benefit of the people of Highbridge. But each time the answer has been that the money can only be spent as specified within the Section 106 agreement, which states that £868.15 to Sedgemoor District Council for Isleport open space contribution towards the cost of improving and enhancing Sedgemoor District Council public open space and pedestrian links at Isleport Ponds. In October 2015, Sedgemoor District Council issued a press release, which was widely reported, which stated, I quote, "Clearly, the spending of such a large amount of money is not being considered lightly, and the council would need to take time to make sure it is spent to the maximum effect for the enhancement of public open space for the residents of Highbridge. Handing over Section 106 money to the developer is clearly not in line with the terms of the agreement, and the building of houses on our last remaining green open space is far from enhancing it. The perception locally is that the money is merely going to line the pockets of the developer's shareholders, and as such breaks the terms of a Section 106 agreement. I doubt the Asda developers would be happy, as I would not be, and this could expose the council to all sorts of legal challenges. I therefore request that you consider this and all the other points raised here today and select option 2 to not approve the disposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Keane. I'd now like to go to Janet Keane. Janet, are you on the line?
Yes, Chairman, thank you. Let's get my glasses on.
The floor is yours, Janet.
Thank you. It is with sadness that I feel compelled to speak at this scrutiny meeting. At the Executive on June the 24th, for this item, I was a member of the public and spoke only in that capacity, but I have since viewed the Council's video of that meeting. I feel that inadequate thought and debate took place around such an important proposal, and certainly only a passing reference was made to the number of letters of objection received. Each letter, although written by one person, probably represented the views of many, and should not be considered NIMBYism. The proposal is to sell the land at Lakeside, Highbridge, to a developer for the purpose of building market houses. And I oppose the sale of the land at Lakeside, but the following reasons expressed by many other people were not deeply explored. Starting with the wildlife section. Bats. We know that there are several species of bats roosting on this site, but the latest bat survey by the Somerset Bat Group was in 2017. There are many other wild creatures, animals, birds, reptiles, some of which are endangered, who live and forage there and within the close proximity. The ecology reports at various committees are desktop surveys and thus can be misleading. There are insufficient dedicated personnel in the county's ecology department to undertake or arrange for surveys. Records at the Somerset Environmental Records Centre reflect this. Over time, this patch of land has become a local wildlife site, LWS for short, which makes it important. Whether an LWS is in the depths of the country or nestled around a busy town, these sites are exceptional pieces of land where threatened species live and thrive. Quoting from the National Wildlife Trust, "It is not only wildlife in all its complexity which benefits from these sites. Wildlife is a free provider of natural services, largely unrecognized, such as clean air and water, carbon storage, pollination for food production, and many others." Historically, there was very little discussion on the reasons why Sedgemoor purchased the land 20 years ago. The stated purpose was to provide a public open space, but this was never formalised. However, over this 20-year period, the land at Lakeside has become, de facto, a public open space and a wildlife site. A public footpath leads to it with access connecting Wall Road to Springfield Road and crosses the railway line. The public footpath is marked. It has 2 small bridges over water courses, and those water courses are homes to small water mammals such as voles. And within the ground itself, there are other very well-trodden paths. Safety factors. The Executive focused on safety in crossing the railway line, and quite rightly so. But however well intentioned, the debate was not that well informed. The public footpath is the County Council's responsibility, not ours, to either divert it, which would be very difficult, or to close it. The safety debate diverted attention away from the land itself by focusing on the danger of the crossing point. In fact, the railway line is open and visible from Highbridge Station to its crossing under the A38. The line is open, unfenced, and accessible for the whole of that length. Access to open space. In the papers for this meeting, Appendix E states that 35% of the Burnham-on-Sea and Highbridge households within this parish do not have access to open green space. Disposing of this land exacerbates that figure. And we come to the protection and relocation of wildlife. The Executive was informed that an alternative green site will be made. And again, I quote from the National Wildlife Trust. Below a critical size, a wildlife-rich area lacks the resilience to withstand dramatic events such as drought, flood, or, note, nearby hostile land use. Little by little, the species disappear. End of quote. Therefore, relocating the many species of wildlife is a fallacy. Once disturbed, many will perish. Further, in this area, there is nowhere to rehome them, as all the adjacent open land is earmarked for development and planning permissions have been granted. There are reens and mature trees and hedges bordering the land and the ponds to one side. Sedgemoor's commitments. This council is an active participant in the Somerset climate change emergency, and the only real mention of this was by myself in my own presentation. For all the reasons above, disposal of this land makes the council's participation somewhat hypocritical. An honourable course of action would be for the council to retain this land and make its designation as a wildlife site or public open space official. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much for that, Mrs. Keane. That's the end of the public speakers. We now have Joy Russell. Joy has been identified as a key witness in this. So Joy will be permitted to speak now and give her evidence, but will also be allowed to cross-examine key witnesses later on in the meeting as well. So Joy, are you on the line? Can we hear you?
I am. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So the floor is yours for the next few minutes.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. I believe with your help, it wouldn't take too much to make this field, squeezed between the railway line and the industrial estate, even better for the wildlife and our community. You should know what a treasure we have here. This is your opportunity to promote a connection with nature, a simple, low-cost solution to help address the challenges of a warming climate, wildlife loss, and mental health. At the executive meeting, Councillor Slocum stated this development would benefit families desperately needing housing where their children could grow up in a nice area and learn about the species. The nature would still be there, and we also have to live in reality. The reality is the destruction of wildlife and nature that has taken years to evolve. And newsflash, not only is there a housing crisis, but a full-scale climate emergency going on where our wildlife is in the front line. That's the reality. You're missing the point of nature and the value it offers. If you build here, that nature is lost forever. And what about the children who already live here in Highbridge? Don't they deserve this space to be opened up to explore, learn and enjoy? Councillor Gilling said, this is an area surrounded by open countryside where wildlife functions quite successfully, and there are species that are being protected across the district. This concept of countryside is so misguided. The surrounding fields, albeit green and beautiful on first glance, are cultivated to the exclusion of nature, loaded with fertilizers, nitrogen, herbicides and pesticides. This field is worth 100 of those fields. It's been left to do its own thing for years. It's a complex and dynamic ecosystem thriving all on its own. Trapped in an urban environment, it's an inspirational in-between space. Yes, there are protected sites and wonderful nature reserves across Sedgemoor, but we have a site right here, as vital a refuge as the reserves along the coast or on the moors. This unfertilised environment is such a special place for wildlife in contrast to the less diverse farmland beyond. Rough grassland may not be pretty and struggles to fit in with urban life, nor is it tidy, and by its very nature is becoming increasingly rare. But it's not wasteland. There are more species per square metre because it's untouched and is a refuge for a myriad of creatures. You all know about the catastrophic decline in bees globally. Well, it's all the insects that are in danger, and without them, so are we. Being right next to the lakes and the railway line also has its ecological advantages, being part of a nature corridor from the River Brew, and surely it's safer to have nature here rather than a housing development. Now, more crucial than any other time in our lives, we need to teach our children and us to make a connection and engage with nature, to pull on a pair of wellies and explore, go out with a magnifying lens, binoculars or camera, play in mud, get dirty, hug a tree, learn something new every day, watch a kestrel hunt, identify a butterfly, hear different bird songs, watch a sunset through long grass, feel the wind of a bat brush your cheek, discover and learn about the pulse of nature. Then they might just go on to plant a seed, build a bird box, paint a masterpiece, find and care for an injured creature, and learn about compassion, life and death. Write a poem, or just find happiness and wonder. Most importantly, learn how to be an eco-warrior and fight for our planet, fight for their future. So, we have to save this space for them and encourage worthwhile and sustainable living. Simple, you see. Work with the nature, not against it, and we'll all be better off. The Council's failure to use this S106 money is nothing short of criminal. We want you to work for your people and our land. We ask, you don't think about making money or fulfilling quotas. Think that you can create something amazing, a legacy that will last for generations. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much for that, Joy. At this point, I'd like to give the option to Councillor McGuinty if he wishes to answer any of these points. Councillor McGuinty is here representing Councillor Healy, who's a portfolio holder, but has a personal prejudicial interest. Do you wish to comment at this stage, Councillor McGuinty?
Well, thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody. I don't think there's a great deal I can add at this time, but except to say that I felt that the executive did give due consideration to all the points that have been raised, and also paid attention to the officers giving their reports. And I think, on balance, whilst it was a difficult decision, I think at the time the executive made the right decision, and an enhanced area of green open space where people could have easy access to with much needed houses was the way forward at that committee. I'm happy to listen and no doubt happy to have the report come back to executive should members wish it to do so.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'd now like to bring in Mr. Tim Mander and Mr. Nick Tate, the relevant officers of the Council pertaining to this decision. Do either of you wish to say anything at this stage in the meeting in response to the points raised?
It's Nick Tate here. I'm happy just to give a few points, although the majority of the issues, I would say, were set out as responses in the original report to executive and obviously discussed in some detail at that time. I think there's no getting away from the fact that there's been lots of reference about the opportunity of providing an enhanced public open space which is accessible to the people of Highbridge, and why hasn't this been achieved to date? And there is a fundamental issue in terms of the accessibility, which is extremely limited to the existing public rights of way, and in particular the public right of way which crosses the railway. That railway crossing is identified Network Rail. I think I'd need to review their detailed consultation response on the application, but it was probably like 35th in the southwest. They provided evidence of near misses on that, and so any intensification, anything which encouraged more people to use that crossing, would have an objection from Network Rail, and obviously very significant health and safety concerns. And that has been a major issue here, because the monies that have been acquired through the Section 106 agreement in themselves wouldn't have been sufficient to provide an improved and safe crossing of the railway, which would have had to have been a footbridge. There was reference to, well, the developers have now secured an enhanced access to the site via third-party land, and that is true, and that third-party land is part of the overall option agreement and developer package. So that option wasn't available to the council. It has effectively been achieved because they will accrue some development value out of that. And to date, that has been a significant issue in why we have struggled to be able to deliver anything on the site. In terms of the green space issue, again, I we have provided evidence in terms of the accessible natural green space standards. This was evidence that was updated and provided as part of the local plan evidence base. I think the ANCS report is 2017, and that evidence, and indeed the council's policies around accessible natural green space, were all scrutinised through the local plan process, which included extensive public consultation and scrutiny by an independent examiner. Yes, certainly evidence changes over time, and the position would have changed since 1996, but that was the most up-to-date evidence base, and it quite clearly does identify, and rightly identifies, the Waro ponds as ANCS. It didn't identify this undeveloped field as accessible natural green space. That is the evidence there. It does identify there is a deficiency overall within the Burnham and Highbridge area, and certainly additional opportunities to provide accessible natural green spaces in those areas of deficiency, which are mainly further to the east or to the northwest, certainly will be delivered through the local plan policies and proposals. The biodiversity, we've heard a lot about the biodiversity. Again, I think at this stage we would just defer to the detailed consultation responses from Natural England and the Somerset ecologist. There is a very detailed responses, and indeed initially holding objections from the Somerset ecologists until further additional proposals and works were secured, but the result of that is, through the use of very rigorous conditions, that there is no objection on ecology. The Section 106 monies is very much has been tied partly to the point about the ability to use it in this area. I think it's really important to make a separation between the open space that is required and secured to serve the residential development and the additional public open space, which is 750 square meters, which directly relates to the amount of equipped public open space that the Springfield Road residential development, which has already been built, should and would have provided on the site. So the additional public open space secured through the planning process directly relates to the monies to which that Section 106 pertained, and I think it's perhaps slightly misleading to see it as just money that is going to a developer. It is monies which will be used to provide and set out equipped public open space, and in addition to that, potentially improved access to that area in terms of the walking and cycling routes into the site. It's not a case of just handing that monies over, and indeed the actual mechanics of how those Section 106 monies will be used is a matter of detail which will come further in the process. But it could well be that the land, the additional public open space, is effectively provide that the district council undertakes those works on behalf of the developer utilising that money. But it is very much clear that those monies will be delivering specifically equipped public open space directly relating to requirements of Springfield Road. I think nothing really to add in terms of the health and well-being issue. Clearly, in terms of planning and the council's own planning policies, adopted local plan in 2019, it takes a Sedgemoor-wide view of all of these aspects, but it is balancing the requirements for public open space, the requirements for accessible natural green space, the very acute requirements for homes for our residents, and our requirements to meet those, and indeed in terms of providing equipped and well accessible areas of public open space. It is a different type of experience, one accepts that, but it does in particular would provide opportunities for children and young adults in terms of equipment, and potentially things like potentially outdoor gym or trim trail directly relating to encouraging exercise and therefore the well-being element. I think what we have to look at is different spaces have different attraction to different people. I've nothing though to add in terms of the weight to the public consultation, other than I would say through other processes. I believe the planning application is a 2018 planning application, so that has been in discussion and debate for over 18 months, and of course these issues were also discussed and certainly available for discussion through the local plan, which again was in preparation for a period of around 3.5 years, and does include the assumption, it is written into some of the evidence, that this site would have come forward in some form or another for residential development, and it forms part of the housing land supply identified in the local plan. So it was subject again to some rigour and discussion in terms of the comments received through the local plan process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tate. Mr. Mander, do you wish to add anything at this point?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The only thing I really wanted to come back on was I think Mr. Edwards raised it in terms of the value of the land, or the price that's been agreed to pay by the developer. Obviously, there's very little point going back over the history of it in terms of decisions made in 2016 to enter into an option agreement. But when the site was acquired in 1996, at the time, clearly it was for the provision of open space. We paid a price at that stage which reflected that proposed use. Now, the person selling it retained certain what called ransoms over the land, a strip of land, There was a covenant on it for that use. There's another party as well who's got a ransom in terms of access onto the site. So it's not a normal development site. There's not normal development values applied to it. The negotiated price is something like 8 times higher than the price that was initially paid. So to the outsider, it sounds a sort of almost a below market value, but it isn't. It really reflects the situation in terms of the opportunities to develop the land are so dependent on the involvement of third parties. And, you know, that's where we are. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much for that. What I'd like to do in this section of the meeting is to ask the presenters of the call-in, that's Councillors Harvey and Murphy, if you have any specific questions you'd like to ask of any of the witnesses so far.
I have no questions to ask.
Yes?
I've just got a couple for Nick Tate, if he may. One is simply a comment. He talks about having a trim trail on the new public open space. Well, the new public open space is 750 square meters, is 25 by 30 square meters in rectangular size. That's about the size of 3.5 tennis courts. It's not going to be a terribly exciting trim trail that I can see. It's going to be a little bit on the crowded side. But the more important point is I still don't understand, and I'm hoping you can explain to me, why we designate, or why he talks about Walrow Ponds as accessible natural green space, when the definition of accessible is that it is for general public use and free of charge, and the Walrow Ponds are not for general public use and they're not free of charge. So I cannot understand why they are classified as accessible. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Tate, that's up to you to answer, please.
Yeah, certainly, and just briefly in terms of the first point, certainly the emphasis is on more, shall I say, older children, young adult provision. So, if not trim trail, outdoor gym, that type of equipment, rather than just the, shall we say, the sort of the normal slides and equipment which is more geared to the sort of preschool or primary school age. In terms of the angst, I mean, I'm not the author of the angst report, but in terms of the level 1, it does specifically refer to local wildlife sites as being part of the accessible natural green space. And when you go into the angst, it's not just about whether you can get there, it's the perception of openness, which is why when you look at public rights of way, they also count towards accessible natural green space, not because of the square meterage of the public open way, but because of the perception of openness of some of those public rights of way. So you know, the report, the angst report is, I mean, it's part of the evidence base. It's on our website. I extracted the Natural England categories, and as I say, the Walrow Ponds are a local wildlife site. That's why that is included upon it, and that is evidence. At the end of the day, that is evidence that has been scrutinised and confirmed as in terms of going through the local plan examination process.
Councillor Harvey, do you wish to come back on that at all?
I think we have a degree of sophistry that would be appropriate to a Jesuit.
Okay. Councillor Murphy, did you want to have a comment at this stage?
I'm particularly interested in the decision to build on this site to gain 110 homes and the weight that was put against it. I mean, it has been said in many cases that there are enough housing sites to produce any targets that we want without destroying this natural habitat in the way that it could be done. And we're also conscious that when this whole process began, there was a guarantee given by the developer that no hedgerows would be affected, and that there would be, I think the words were, retention and enhancement of existing hedgerows. And yet I have watched the builder walking around the area to the upper left of the Walrow Ponds, casing out the joint, because the only way they can actually get in there is to actually bulldoze the existing 100-year-old hedgerows to make a road. There's no other way. They are not allowed to get into that. And so I think that the actual devastation that could be caused by removal of hedgerows to provide viewpoints, for example, for what they call lakeside view, and I'd like to have a comment on that in terms of the weight that was put onto having 100 houses or 110 houses and having an area of intense natural beauty. What is your feeling about that?
So, Mr. Tate?
Yeah, I can answer or try and answer some of that. And just in terms of the requirement for housing, I mean, you know, so I say quite simply, it's not the case that there are alternative sites for local plan, which again is Council's local plan, which is adopted in February 2019. It sets out, the predication is that it seeks to maximise new housing development in the most sustainable locations. So that's taking account of a whole range of factors, and obviously climate change and environmental matters being one of them, locating housing where there's the greatest opportunity for walking and cycling to job, school, shopping, services, etc. And therefore, going in terms of its assumptions, it assumes development on the sites such as this, and indeed one or two other sites in the Burnham and Highbridge area. If this site wasn't coming forward, yes, there will be other sites will come forward, presumably out in some of our more rural locations on greenfield sites, either probably through an appeal process or in terms of if we were able to review our local plan and keep ahead of that development pressure. But it's not a case that there's a big supply of better performing sites elsewhere. I mean, in terms of the matters, you know, without dwelling or straying too much into the planning side of it, but it is an outline. The resolution to grant is for an outline planning permission, so that's other than the location of the primary public open spaces, because that was such an important matter, and means of access. All other matters are dealt with subsequently with a reserved planning application. And so at this stage, it is pure speculation about the impact and what hedgerows may be impacted upon. The critical thing, though, is to look at the extensive list of conditions which have to be complied with. And obviously, a number of those were very specifically put in to ensure that the impact on nature conservation was minimised and there was no significant impacts. So whether people are wandering around looking at sites at the site, whether there's speculation about what hedgerows may or may not be impacted on, that would all be addressed through the subsequent reserve matters planning application. So at this stage, you know, we're unable to comment on that because there simply isn't any detail that's been submitted.
Councillor Murphy, do you wish to come back on that?
And just to say that I do accept the speculation aspect.
Okay, thank you. What I'd like to do now is ask if Joy Russell is still with us. Is there any particular questions that Joy would like to ask of the officers or the executive member present?
Well, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, well, one of the things that niggles at me is their idea of an open space being used by the community. I really don't think that the locals are going to go to a different housing development and feel relaxed, you know, to be able to enjoy this site, this space that they're planning on. It's manicured, sanitised. It's not a natural green space. I don't think the locals will use it. And when you're talking about putting in trim trails and gym equipment, etc., all that stuff, you know, at the Apex Leisure Park, fantastic place, the gym equipment there, I've got to say, I have never seen anybody actually use it. And I think a lot of the equipment, if you were talking about directing, adolescents and young adults to use this area, I think they would use it, probably for speaking underneath and maybe practicing graffiti and things like that. I just think that the value of this natural green space is being, totally undervalued. And I really still don't understand about the access issues, at that executive committee meeting. It was all about the level crossing and the idea of securing access alongside the Bristol Bridge seemed a fantastic alternative. I don't understand why you couldn't negotiate with the owners of these ransom strips to make it work, or after all this time. I just feel like the council have not been doing their work, and I feel that maybe, like Charlie said, it has been underhand, and also the response of the locals has been strong, and numerous objections, collecting the signatures, knocking on people's doors. I spoke to hundreds of people who were just pissed off with it all. You should be really worrying about how the public actually perceive what this council's actually doing. We really have had enough. We're bulging at the seams. To build another housing development in Highbridge is ridiculous at this point. It doesn't feel safe to walk down Market Street anymore. There's just so much criminality going on, and why would anybody want to live here? I can only imagine just commuters, so they can just pop on the train and get the hell out of Highbridge. I really am quite exasperated with your replies. It just seems like we're working with a top-down democracy where central government decides and it knows what's best, and local voices are completely ignored.
Thank you, Joy. Mr. Tate, do you wish to come back on that one, or Mr. Mander?
I'm not on the majority of the points, but I think actually I would certainly agree that the nature of the open space provision will certainly be different. Now the opportunity to provide more formal equipped open space to the benefits of the residents at Springfield Road. I think, and as has been said, actually providing the improved access from the A38 beside the lakes does mean that it is close and convenient to Springfield Road. Whether people will feel and want to do that, will want to go into that area, or feel that they're almost intruding upon that space, I suppose that's again slightly speculative. I suppose I can only speak from my personal experience, where I would have gone, well, I on numerous occasions go to Apex, but indeed have gone to play areas in existing estates, because if there's a good play area, you think, well, we'll take our kids there and make use of it. But it will be different. We accept that. I mean, as mentioned about whether something like an outdoor gym might work. I mean, and again, a few of the speakers earlier mentioned certainly that COVID-19, and probably at the moment, if I was going back to a gym, an outdoor gym probably feels a lot safer and a lot more attractive than indoor gym. So actually, one would probably expect of seeing more intensive use of those facilities. But again, that is detail which would have to come through a subsequent sort of planning application. I would have some sympathy in terms of we are under targets in terms of providing new homes, and there's a housing delivery test, and we have to demonstrate we've got 5 years of housing supply, and that is why, in terms of preparing a development plan, it is a very difficult and challenging process, and it involves a range of compromises on a whole number of issues. In some cases, there's no, unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of saying no to growth. And indeed, we are in the midst. We've got a climate change crisis. We all understand that. We've got a housing crisis. I think we all understand that. And in some cases, we're trying to marry those 2 points together. But hybrids, the opportunity for further development, we would see that as helping to enhance the wider Highbridge area, and the fact that it is within a short distance to a mainland railway station, I'm sure is an attractive. It makes the area attractive, but bringing in more people, providing homes, providing opportunity for jobs locally, but also opportunities for sustainable transport are all part of the considerations, which is why we identify or seek to maximise growth in Burnham and Highbridge, along with Bridgewater as our main settlements.
Joy, do you wish to come back at all on any of that?
I'm no longer muted. Yes, I would like to say, with the developments that have already been agreed in Highbridge, there wasn't so much local opposition, I believe, because it was being built on farmland. Now, this is completely different. This is, a very precious site. And I really think it shouldn't be sacrificed at all.
Okay, thank you for that. What I'd like to do now, as part of the progress of this meeting, is to open up the discussion to the committee members of the Scrutiny Committee. If any of the committee members here would like to speak, you need to just jot your name down into the chat box there. But any contributions on the discussion or any questions to either of the officers or to Joy as a key witness, or to Councillor McGuinty. Are there any members of the Scrutiny Committee would like to ask a question at this stage? I have Councillor Revens down. Councillor Revens.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smedley. Good afternoon. I'm just looking at the point 1 notes that I've made, and I'm just trying to understand the chronology of how this site was acquired as public open space, but then never actually allocated as such, but then it kind of appears to have been allocated as such, and I do find it somewhat confusing that we've got ourselves into this situation with its designation. If this land in 2012 was referred to as public open space, if it was put out in a press release that this area was protected by development in planning policy, if there was an RLT1 applied to it, if we had a section 106 with another developer bringing in £399,868.10 for this piece to enhance the public open space, but apparently it's not public open space. It seems like it might well be Schrodinger's public open space. I wonder whether we could have an explanation as to why we're in this situation. Thank you.
That's a question for Mr. Tate, I believe.
I'll give some of it a go. I have been at Sedgemoor over 30 years, but some of the original designation predates even myself. But the whole of the area, I believe, was allocated. So in the Burnham on Sea area local plan, which I think was adopted in 1991 from recollection, and actually part of the site was the development which is known as Lakeside, was subsequently, that part of the site was actually subsequently sold and developed for housing. So certainly in about 1991 it was an allocation. What has happened is that allocation was never implemented. It was a designation on a proposals map, but in terms of it becoming formal public open space, that hasn't ever been implemented. We've had similar, it's not unique to this area. We had an area of public open space allocated in the Burnham area, which probably in the Bridgewater area, which remained undeveloped until about 5 years ago, which has now become the Wendon Parklands area. So it was an allocation that hadn't been implemented. Obviously, what's happened as subsequent plans have come forward, the Sedgemoor district local plan, which superseded the Burnham plan, possibly, if I look back on it now, possibly erroneously, but what that did is it didn't have a specific allocation anymore, but it included under the policy RLT1, which protects existing open space, and this area of land was included under the RLT1 designation. Now, given that the open space allocation never been implemented, I think looking back on that decision, it was probably erroneous to protect it, but regardless of that, it was protected as under policy RLT1, and that policy was also saved when we, in 2011, adopted the council's core strategy. Very different type of document, so there wasn't a detailed review in terms of evidence-based, looking at all our existing open spaces or spaces which were included under that policy, and that would have been in place at the time then of the Springfield Road and the Section 106 agreement, which is why there would be references in that document. The most recent, in terms of most recent review, which is the local plan, which was adopted in 2019, a much more detailed, shall we say, going back to an older style local plan and detailed evidence base. All of our open spaces were assessed again, and a number, it wasn't just this, but a number of sites were no longer protected as existing open space because they weren't public open spaces. So in the terms of this land, when we would have looked at the assessment, it was undeveloped land in the ownership of a council, but the ownership is not a consideration when we're undertaking this assessment. We are merely looking at the use of the land. So it was undeveloped grazing land which had a public right of way across it. So it didn't meet our definition in terms of protecting existing public open space in the same way as references being made, for example, to Apex Park or the large area of public open space of Ben Travis Way in the development there, and that was part of the updated evidence base, which has been referred to, which supported the local plan. That was concurrent with the angst proposal as well. So the current policy position and the current proposals map, if you look at that, council's proposals map, this area has no designation on it. It is just as similar to other undeveloped pieces of land within a settlement boundary. But it is, as we say, sort of white land in terms of the proposals map. So I would fully accept that the history has been difficult and in some cases confusing, and I suppose it's processes like this when you have the benefit of trying to drill back and look at how things have evolved, that I think it has at various times mistakenly been referred to as public open space because of that protection. But the fundamental thing is the current designation, it is just white land. So it's, that's not effectively got any protection or designation on it.
Councillor Revens, do you wish to come back on that?
Yes, if I may. So you accept that mistakes have been made in terms of referring it to public open space in the press release and in committee reports when that wasn't the case? I'll just clarify that now.
I believe that's the case, having had the benefit more recently, not probably over the course of when considering the planning application, when we drilled back, it was because it had the RLT, the protection of public open space designation put on it, but of course it had never actually been implemented. So in that sense, it is understandable. You know, it's entirely understandable why that position and why that references has been made, and of course, in many ways, that has been a significant, shall I say, sort of negotiating tool in ensuring through the planning process that additional land above policy requirement, above the requirement just to meet the housing development, that we have secured additional land on this area, and part of that discussion has been, shall I say, that is it or wasn't it public open space? But certainly, you know, I think it's fair to say if I was looking back at some reports now, we would have clarified the position and made it clear that it was never formally implemented as public open space.
Okay, I do at this stage need to bring in Mrs. O'Farrell, who's the legal officer, who may want to clarify some points. We are quite close to the planning issues here, which are not under scrutiny. It's the executive decision. Mrs. O'Farrell, do you want to come in?
Yes, I just wanted to clarify the point which in fact Nick has just made himself, which is when we were talking about the council making a mistake, that mistake, if indeed it was a mistake, is the use of the land as public open space other than as a grazing area or a space that is not designated. So I was just going to reiterate that point because, of course, under the Town and Country Planning Act, if you look at the definition of an open space, it will include the area that we're talking about here today. However, that doesn't make it a designated open space. So I just wanted to be very clear that whilst terminology might have been better used, the processes that do apply to protected areas and unprotected areas through planning, which of course we can't really dwell on because executive have no powers to alter the planning decisions. But I just felt that it was important to stress that point at this time. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. I would like to ask if there are any other committee members who would have a question for any of the officers or the witnesses so far. I'm not seeing any indication of any committee member wishing to ask further. If that is the case, then we do need to ask a member of the committee to suggest a way forward, a recommendation. I noticed that Councillor Evans has his hand up. I'll take that as a equivalent to put his name in the chat section.
Thank you. Saves me having to get my arthritic fingers across the keyboard. The point I was going to make wasn't actually a planning point. It was that the public perception was that this land was public open space, and that may well be mistaken in a legal sense. But I think the public perception of it being a public open space is also important and pertinent. Anyway, I hear what Councillor McGinty said earlier. I think that was a very welcome statement that he would be happy to have this back at the executive to take another look at it, and so I would therefore propose the option that we refer this back to the executive for further consideration in more detail, and look forward to a detailed discussion on the 6 grounds that were outlined in the call-in paper that was submitted.
Thank you. That's a proposal. I have a seconder by Councillor Bruce. Councillor Bruce, do you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'd just like to say I obviously second that recommendation, and I'd also like to commend those members of the public who've made such passionate representations here today. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
To defend the preservation of green space within the community. The delivery of housing is a key council priority, obviously, but it should not be allowed to ride roughshod over other priorities, such as people's health and well-being, their right to access green space, and the council's aim to become a carbon neutral borough by 2030.
Okay, thank you. I think before we go to a vote on this, Mr. O'Farrell wishes to come back in again.
Thank you, Chair. It was just to say that whilst the recommendation to refer the matter back to the executive is absolutely a legitimate one that can be made, that the executive are, as they have been and will remain so, they are restrained by legislative requirements. So whilst you can talk about sufficient weight being given and they can reconsider those points, they will have to still follow the law. So it may be that while the outcomes that you're looking for may not be guaranteed because of the restraints on the executive, and that was the only point I wanted to make. I didn't want to give false or true hope to anyone, but just to clarify the point that the executive are bound by certain legislative requirements. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. The proposal has been put by Councillor Evans, seconded by Councillor Bruce, that the executive have a look at this again. The decision referred back to the executive, who can look at those 6 points. They may be legally bound to react in different ways to either of those, any of those 6 points. But that's the proposal, that they do so. They look at this again. I think I can go to the vote on this when nobody else is indicating to speak. And in doing so, what I will do is go through the committee members by name and ask them to confirm they've seen and heard the debate and whether they're in favour of Councillor Evans' motion, against or abstaining. And I'm going to take that in alphabetical order. So the first person is Councillor Bruce.
Yes, so I've heard all of the debate and I'd like to vote in favour. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dyer.
Chairman, I do believe Councillor Dyer may have left the meeting.
Okay, so then Councillor Finneran.
Yes, Chairman, I can confirm that I have listened to the whole debate and I support the motion.
Thank you very much. Councillor Levy.
Yes, I can confirm that I've listened to the whole debate and I'm in support of the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Revens.
Thank you. I can confirm that I've heard and seen the whole debate, apart from a brief interlude where I had to collect a DPD package in the middle of when Mr. Murphy was speaking, but I was hearing him throughout, and my vote is in favour of the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Also, my own vote as chair will be in favour of that motion as well. I declare that therefore a unanimous vote that this call-in is successful, and the referral of the decision back to the executive to review that in the light of the comments made today. And I'd also like to add my own thanks to all the members of the public who very capably and passionately represented their views, and thank you to the councillors for bringing the call in for us today. With that decision, I believe that brings the business of the meeting to a conclusion, and I'd like to thank everybody for taking part today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to everybody.